Hey, hi, hello guys. Welcome back to Code with Nani YouTube channel. Today we're going to discuss about loops, why we are using loops, what are the types of loops, and some hands-on practice problems based on the loops. So before we get into this topic, so I want to ask you guys a question. So why we are using loops? So what is a loop? So loop is basically we're repeating a particular statement over particular period of time. So why we are using loops? So I'll give a real-time example so that you'll get to know what's the reason behind why we are using loops. So let's take a case. You want to print Nani 50 times. So if you want to print Nani 50 times, so how do you gonna do? Like in the traditional way, you'll write print statement 50 times. So it's a very bad practice in terms of coding. So what you will do is you loop the statement like while greater than 0, you loop a particular statement and print Nani. So what we are doing, we are looping a particular statement over certain period of time. Suppose let's say n can be 50, 60 or 100, whatever the number be. So we are extracting the pattern. What is the pattern? Printing Nani. So how many times we want to print? Depending upon that, we are looping the particular statement. So we now we know why we are using loop. So let's get into types of loops. Types of loops. So basically there are three types of loops. First one, while loop. Do while loop. And the third one is for loop. So third one is for loop. So I'll give let's take while loop and while loop. So while loop is a entry control loop. Entry control loop. But do while loop is a exit control loop. So why? Because we say this is an entry control loop or this is an exit control loop. So how does while loop works? So it will check a particular condition. If that condition is true, then only while loop will execute. While loop, the conditions which we are writing in the while loop will execute. But whereas in the case do while loop, it will just run the statement, then it will check for the condition. So when we are exiting, then it will check for the condition. That's why we are using do while loop as an exit control. Whereas in while loop, it will just first check the condition, then only it will give entry to that particular statement. So it only execute if condition is true. It will execute first and check condition. So do while loop will, even if the condition is false, do while loop will execute at least once, because it will run the statement, then it will check for the condition. If the condition is false at the first iteration, then at least for once the control statement is been executed. So that is why at least one do while loop will be executed. And also there for the for loop, it is just like a counter iteration. So we already know how many times we have to run the loop. Like suppose if there will be a case where n is 50, so we'll run from 1 to 50 times, just like an iteration, and we'll execute some control statement inside of the for loop. So let's just check for the syntax. That's for the syntax. First one, while loop, while condition statement, whereas do while, it will first do the statements, then check for the condition, and so while will check for the condition, then only statement will be executed, whereas do while, first it will execute the statement, then it will check for the condition. And whereas the for loop, for initialization, condition, then increment, then here statements. So what is this initialization, condition, or incrementation? So I'll give you an example, you'll get to know the picture behind it. Suppose we want to execute a print statement 50 times, right? So we'll take an example for int I is equal to 0, as we are initializing the I with 0. That is initialization, and condition should be less than 50. If we are counting from 1 to 50, we'll include 52, but we are counting from 0, so it will goes up to 49. So if you include 0, it will be totally 50 times. So as in 50 I plus plus. If you don't mention I plus plus, then the loop will just stays around I equal to 0, and it will become infinite loop, and the memory will be overloaded, and it will give you a memory or memory limit exceeded. So you gotta increment the counter and say cout none. So it will just print the nanny 50 times. So these are the syntaxes of the for loop, while loop, and do while loop. So I'll give an example for while and do while loop. While int n equal to 50, while n greater than 0, cout none. So what we are doing here is we are counting from 50, and if n is greater than 0, we are re-executing the same statement. Then here n equal to n minus 1. So how this works? At first n is 50 and n is greater than 0, it will print cout nani. Then n becomes 49. So then again n is 49, as n is greater than 0, it is true. So cout nani will be executed, and then n becomes 48. So that's how it will loop on until n equal to 0. Whenever that n is equal to 0, it will comes out of the loop. So how do while loop executes? So do while loop do cout nani in line while n greater than 0 and n minus minus. So it will print nani and then becomes 49 here, as n greater than 0, it will again executed and cout nani, and again it will execute. So that's how do while loop works. So let's get hands-on problems on the practice problems on the do while loop statements. So let's take an example. Suppose you want to print n natural numbers. Let's take an example. Int n, whatever be the number, Suppose you want to print 1 to that n natural numbers, so you can use whatever loop you want. So I'm just using for loop because we already know what is the final terminating condition. So I'll be using int for loop I is equal to 1 because the natural number starts from 1 whereas whole number starts from 0. So I less than n I plus plus c out I. Let's try. Let's see. Let's check for the edge cases. Let's take 10 natural numbers. So let's give equal to, because we have to include that particular natural number as well. And run it again. 10. See, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. So that's how loops works. So if you want to use the same Sublime text which I was using on this video, so do check out my on DSA list. You'll find how do you install Sublime on your local machine, install it and run it on your local machine. So we want to check, we want to print even numbers between 1 to n natural numbers. Suppose if the n is 50, you have to print even numbers between 1 and 50. So let's see how it will works. Let's do it with while loop while n greater than 0 if n divided by 2 is equal to 0. I'll just do it with for loop, it will be more easier. I is equal to 1, I is equal to 50 I plus plus if I divided by 2 is equal to 0, which means we have to use cout a particular number. Let's run it. So 2 4 6 8 10 12. So how does this code works? As we know we are looping from for I equal to 1, I less than or equal to n, which is basically 50 in this case, I plus plus, and if I modulo 2 equal to 0, we are just printing out I. So what is this specific Boolean expression? So I divide modulo 2 equal to 0, which means if particular I, like let's take if the number is 10, modulo divided by 2 equal to 0 means if it is divided by 2 and gives remainder as 0, it means it is completely divisible by 2. So whenever a number is completely divisible by 2, which means it is an even number. So when we divided by 2 and it gives a remainder as 0, then we are printing that particular number. So that's the piece of code that I wrote over there. So that's it. So that's it for the today's video, guys. If you like the video, do share it with your friends, subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon if you don't want to miss any further updates. So that's it for today. See you, tata, bye bye. See you tomorrow with a great new content. Tomorrow we'll discuss hands-on problems on this topic loops. So stay tuned. Goodbye, tata, bye bye.